welcome to the Postmodern Art Podcast, the podcast dedicated to giving artists who are wowing the world over the platform they deserve. I am your host, Nathan Ragland, and for today's episode, let's spark some incredible conversation for you guys. Today's guest is Adam Unze, an actor, voice artist, and the host of the podcast, The Spark Parade, a podcast where he and several sensational artists geek out about their cultural spark of inspiration. The Spark Parade is a podcast that I've been listening to for months now, one that I absolutely enjoy, and for you guys that love this podcast, I think you'll love it as much as this one. So I figured why not have Adam on the podcast and have him talk about the incredible podcast, the incredible guests he's been able to talk to, and just his influence in art altogether. If you enjoy Adam and want to listen to more of the incredible stuff that he wants to talk about, you should check out his podcast as well as all of his links down in the description below. If you enjoy this podcast, make sure you like, share, subscribe, or follow whatever audio streaming platform you prefer. Leave 5 stars wherever you can. I see that and I absolutely love it. If you want a place to talk more about this podcast or a place to connect to some incredible artists altogether, you should consider joining the Postmodern Art Podcast Artist Sanctuary Discord server. You can join other incredible artists in there, including some former guests of the podcast. We can all have a nice, fun community to where we can truly love and cherish each other and lift each other up. Link to that server will be in the description below. If you want to go even further with that support of the podcast, maybe you should consider being a part of the Postmodern Art Podcast Patreon. There you can see behind the scenes content that was cut. You get an opportunity to ask guest questions, and so much more. Incredible opportunities to help really support and grow this podcast ever so further. Consider joining today at patreon.com/PMAP. But now, without further ado, please enjoy the Postmodern Art Podcast.
How's it going?
It's going well. How about yourself?
Yeah, good. It's where are you?
Georgia, so southeast side, similar to where you are. You're in New York, if I last remember, right?
That is right, and it is very humid here.
It's
disgusting.
It's been hot for like the past week here for me. All right, and I work in a warehouse that doesn't really have air conditioning. We have giant fans, but not really much air conditioning. So yeah, it's just been sweltering, and I've been melting, and yeah.
Yep, pretty much everything that I do, I need to have quiet. So turning on, we have like a window unit air conditioner and too much noise, so I just have to sit here and sweat most of the day.
Oh, I'm fully aware. Trust me, I have my little personal AC unit right there, and luckily I had that thing on full blast right before I hopped into this call or whatnot, so the room is going to be cool, but give it about, an hour or so, depending on how long this conversation is, and I'll be sweating bullets.
Yeah, we're also super lazy, and so, I put the bedroom air conditioner in because, absolutely cannot sleep without it, but we have this gigantic beast for the rest of the apartment, and we haven't put that in yet because it's a real pain to get in, but we need to do that.
I'm sure it'll happen at some point.
Yeah. I think that's maybe more than enough air conditioning chat for one day.
I mean, it's a good way to start more than anything else. Get us nice and loose, get us ready for the conversation. Okay, Adam, before we really get going, I must ask the icebreaker question of the podcast. Let's say you get to go to a desert island on your own accords. It is just you, alone with your thoughts. You get to kick back, relax, breathe, just get to enjoy yourself for a little bit. To help make sure you can relax, you can bring one piece of media or one piece of art with you to help make sure you don't go completely insane. Again, this is a desert island. If given this opportunity, what would that one piece be?
Okay, this is perhaps more problematic a more problematic question for me than for other people. Any kind of favorite question for me, especially when it comes to art, is just my brain melts. I don't know what to do because I have so many things that I love, and the irony of me hosting a podcast where I basically do the same thing to other people and expect them to tell me their favorite, and I don't really have a favorite thing planned in mind. That said, let's go with I'm gonna say the Purple Rain soundtrack.
Ooh, that is a very good choice right there.
Yeah, it's I grew up in the Twin Cities, so there's a very heavy civic pride in all of Prince's work, and I just love his music, and yeah, it's a good solid foundation for all of my other artistic endeavors. So
I mean, that's very fair, especially with just the replay value that that album has along, because it's like just about every single song on that album could be a hit on its own that you could just listen to over and over again, either start to finish or just on its own, one at a time on repeat.
yeah, I think especially if you're going to have that be the only piece of culture you can have,
Yeah.
having an album that's like all killer, no filler is very important.
That is absolutely important, but nevertheless, the Purple Rain album, that is your answer. You're locking that in.
I am locking that in.
All right, then. If that's the case, I cannot think of a better way to start the Postmodern Art Podcast. Welcome, everyone. I am your host, Nathan Ragland. Feel free to like, share, subscribe on whatever audio streaming platform you prefer. You can support the podcast on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/PMAP and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at PostmodArtPod for future updates and guest announcements, including today's guest. He is the host of The Spark Parade, a pod where he and several sensational artists geek out about their cultural spark of inspiration. Welcome to the podcast, actor, voice artist, and podcaster, Adam Unze.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here.
Well, it is a pleasure to have you here. Ever since I first heard about your podcast, I have just absolutely loved what you've been able to put out. And I, consider the fact that we both have a love for art and artists in general, I figured we were at least on a fairly similar wavelength. So I figured we'd have some good conversations that I'm just excited to get into. But wow, words. Before we really divulge into the artists that you are presenting and the podcast you present, I want to go back just a little bit, if I may, and learn more or less the origin stories of Adam. What got you interested in art in the first place?
So I started acting when I was 8 years old.
Oh, wow.
And the Minneapolis and St. Paul have a lot of theaters. There's more theater seats per capita in the Twin Cities than any other place in the United States, including New York. So I did a lot of theater when I was a kid, and yeah, I've just always been obsessed with art and entertainment. And I went to a performing arts high school, sort of like LaGuardia in New York, or the school in Fame. I guess that's a very dated reference now, but so
I got the reference. If that makes you feel any better.
Thank you.
All right. I mean, it was acting just kind of always something you've just been interested in? Like, do you remember when you were first introduced to like just doing it, just kind of just being in that Minneapolis culture, or was there like a particular like pushing point or tipping point for you for wanting to go down that path?
Yeah. So my grandma directed musicals,
Okay.
was very into performance, and in fact forced my mom and all of her siblings into a family band, a la the Von Trapps and the Sound of Music or something. And they were the Cohen family singers.
Okay.
And I think about 2 out of 5 of them were actually into it, and the rest were just, dragged kicking and screaming into this. So anyway, there's a history of kind of performance in my family. My aunt lives in LA. She's an actor, and she's, been at it for a very long time. So I had all these kind of people in my family who were involved in the arts. And then, when I was 8, I just auditioned for a play and got a part in it, and that was it.
Oh, I mean, if nothing else, that's a good start for that kind of path. Like, would you say that you've always had kind of that passion for it, or do you remember a moment where it went from just like a general love for it to a passion and wanting to make it your career?
For as long as I can remember. I mean, I'm not the kind of person who fell into artistry. Like, I know people who were like on the football team and broke their leg and couldn't play football anymore, and then their teacher suggested drama as a way to get over their depression about not playing sports, and now they act. And it's like, that's not me. I always knew, I was always into it. And yeah, like art, being an artist, being surrounded by art, that's all I've ever wanted.
Well, that's good. It's nice to know that love and passion has always just kind of been there. I mean, especially growing to the point to where you got a chance to. I assume that was something that's helped take you to several places. Like, you kind of talked about. You started off in Minnesota or whatnot, but I was doing my research and whatnot. I realized you've been like, you're currently living in New York. You've also been to London as well. Like, was that part of like the acting career, or is that just career in general, just leading you to those places?
Sort of, yeah. My oldest sister moved to the UK first when I was a teenager, and she lived in London for a while, and I went there to visit her and just kind of became obsessed with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, I went there to study, but I ended up living there for 12 years. I was there for a long time. I'm a British citizen now, and it's kind of weird. Like, my mom and my oldest sister are British citizens too. We all have citizenship through different means.
Okay.
And I have one sister who lives in Seattle, and she's the only person in my immediate family who is not a British citizen. So, but yeah, long time in London, and then now in New York. So focusing on big cities.
I have to know as well, like, obviously, like, being in acting and getting to go to all these different places or whatnot, did it more or less give you a better love and appreciation for art in general? Like, does being in it, like, truly entrenched in it, really help you, like, appreciate art in a different way?
Yeah, at least for me, I I don't understand people who don't have that kind of connection to artistry, or it feels weird to me. I also, like when I was growing up, I'd have friends who just kind of were happy to float through life and land in any old job, just like whatever came their way, didn't really have anything that was driving them. And that was enough. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But for me, it was like, this was always the thing that was driving me forward. So I think the second I started performing, I was addicted to it. I didn't ever want to stop. And then being involved in the arts, I don't know. I mean, I think they're kind of two lanes that are intertwined. So there's like my life as a performer, and then also my appreciation of artistry in general. And I'm obsessed with music. I don't make music. You know, uh, every other kind of live performance, film, TV, whatever. So I think I have this lifelong love and appreciation for the art that other people make, and then this driving passion to create art myself. So.
Oh yeah, no, honestly, like, yeah, you're describing it, and honestly, I cannot tell you how much I feel, if not like exactly the same, at least in a similar vein, more than anything else. I never was like an acting person myself, but like I went to college for filmmaking and such, so being able to like create films and such, and being able to perform in that sort of essence, and obviously with this podcast as well, like as much of it as presenting the other artists or whatnot, it's still a bit of a performance to me, and I truly love and appreciate like when people are able to put forth their art, especially, but like I can further appreciate it like just as it is, even if I didn't have the performing aspect on my side, at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. Now, words come back to me. Come back to me. This. Can you think of some of the bigger, like, this might go a little bit into like some later questions, but can you think of some of like the biggest pieces of artwork that have kind of like inspired you more or less, or like has kind of carried you when it comes to like appreciating art in general?
Yeah, I mean, all of Prince's back catalog is pretty important to me. There's, a lot of music, that I grew up in a household that was full of music. My dad in particular was really, as into music as I am, and there's a a record store called the Electric Fetus in
Ooh.
Minneapolis, and we used to go there all the time and kind of dig through crates. And this was at a time when people still bought physical media, and so I think more than individual pieces of art, it's just like mass voracious consumption of all forms of art, and not really being that discerning in my taste. It's like I really appreciate lots of everything. So yeah, I don't know, artists like Prince, uh films and filmmakers. I mean, I'm thinking people like Alex Garland. I just went to see Men over
Oh,
the
okay.
weekend, and you know that's going to be very divisive. I don't think it's for everyone, but I really appreciate his work. And yeah, I don't know, like so many people. I'm obviously not doing a very good job of pulling names right now, but
I mean,
that's a little foundation
to be
right
fair,
there.
when it comes to like just art in general, there are so many incredible. You can attest this as someone that presents incredible artists. There's so many different incredible artists doing so much incredible stuff and putting out just amazing content that like you can't just. It's really hard to narrow down like a specific person and one thing that they love like one at a time. Like if it's very hard to have more or less a narrow point of view when it comes to art, especially with how everyone is doing their own way of creating it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's it gets harder and harder. Like, we live in a time where there's so much content. It's really,
Oh
there are
yeah.
not enough hours in the day. So yeah.
Yeah, you're telling me, freaking. I'm just thinking of like all the artists that I love or whatnot, and all the different ways to consume their media. And I love that you mentioned a little bit about like thinking back in the day when you had like going to the vinyl stores and stuff like that. Because something on your podcast, the Spark Parade, which again we'll definitely divulge a lot more into in a second. One of the things that you love to emphasize is more or less your appreciation of like the physical media, how the way that the way that was like back in the day, like 80s, 90s, 2000s or whatnot, the way that it was a lot more, I guess, intimate would probably be like the better word for it at this point. Like, what is it
Mhm.
about just kind of how media has evolved that has made you like appreciate the different ways that you can consume it?
I mean, I think, there's good things and bad things about physical media, and there's good things and bad things about digital media.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely getting, going to a record store and looking around, not having the stuff that was being thrown at me dictated by an algorithm,
Yeah.
and just being able to kind of discover things on my own. And I did a lot of, used CD shopping. When I was a teenager, I worked as a busboy in a restaurant and got a lot of cash tips. And so I just take
There you
this
go.
wad of money and go down and dig through CDs and just discover things that, sometimes it might be just the cover that I was like, this is $3. I'll just try it out.
Yep.
So a lot of that stuff about like in-person discovery, I really miss, but I don't miss having thousands of CDs taking up my entire apartment. And things like going to Blockbuster and wanting to see a movie that just came out and it not being there because everybody had taken all the copies or whatever. Like, we don't have to deal with those problems anymore.
All right. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and I talk a lot on my show to my guests about like the flip side of that being that, especially in regards to music, there's been this kind of devaluing of the art. It's harder for musicians to make money off of records now,
Yeah.
and it's the mass consumer mindset where everybody has all this content thrown at them all the time. People don't really have the patience to listen to whole albums anymore. People don't necessarily even have the patience to listen to whole songs that they don't know. So yeah, advantages and disadvantages on both sides.
Oh yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I was gonna say I know I'm on kind of both sides of the fence when it comes to this one, because it's like when it comes to the digital stuff, I've more or less like kind of grew up in that more or less mentality. Like I have a Spotify, I delve deep into YouTube and get exposed to so many different like ways because of that. But I've also been like really getting to a lot of physical stuff these days. You know, like I've been growing like a vinyl record collection and such, and like vinyl is just absolutely like something special that I appreciate, like the art form that goes into like making a true like record like that. I've always been a person that just appreciates an entire product. So I think I'm kind of, maybe an outlier compared to some people, compared to some that, just want to have like the single, or just want to like know the little bit from like said artist before, moving on to the next big thing or whatnot. So.
Right. Yeah. And like for me, I appreciate art in a kind of pedantic, microscopic way that I like to know every single thing about the art that I'm engaging
Yes.
with. So if I listen to an album, I don't just want to like listen to it passively. I care about the lyrics. I care about the story of it being made, the impact that it had on the world, all these other things. So I'm the guy who's like, when I have a vinyl record in front of me that has a sleeve and has liner notes in it, I want to read it. I want to know,
Yes.
who played guitar, all those kinds of things. So, yeah, having kind of a deeper appreciation, or a nerdier appreciation for the art that I consume.
I imagine you're probably like me. Like you're the kind of person that will take like an album and listen to it just like start to finish, uninterrupted as is, to try to get like the flow and the story that they're trying to tell with that one. And then you might just go in afterwards, whether it be with the vinyl sleeve or just online, and try to see like any sort of breakdown, any sort of information that maybe the artist has revealed about it, just to like truly know where they're coming from and truly appreciate the art form that they're trying to present out there.
Yeah, it's hard because like when there is so much available all the time, making time to really let a piece of art breathe, like somebody puts out an album, and just forcing myself to actually listen to it all the way through, even if there are songs that I'm like, ugh, this is kind of boring or whatever, because sometimes you listen to an album 3 times and the song that you hated the first time you listened to it becomes your favorite one. So yeah, it's like, not just from a consumer perspective, but from the industry's perspective, like there's a lot less patience. There's so many people out there trying to make art that it's like, if you don't grab people's attention in 10 seconds, they're on to the next thing.
Right.
Excuse me.
I was gonna say, I know, like, whenever you describe just kind of the, listen to something 3 times before, like, songs you get or whatnot, that's just basically the Weeknd's back catalog for me. At first, I didn't fully get it, but then, like, listening to it over and over again, like, I started understanding the intricacies and the stories or whatnot. I'm like, okay, I could truly love and appreciate it. Not Dawn FM. I got that one like almost immediately, but like most of his other back catalog, I had to like take some time to let it really like marinate a little bit in me before I really like appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy that it's like, at the beginning it was this kind of fringy, like almost minimal electronic music thing, and he's progressed to a stage now where it's like this perfect, finely tuned pop that's like, that last album is incredible. It feels like the work that his whole career has been building towards.
Is it just me, or at least within like the past like couple years or so, I feel like a lot of artists, especially if they've been going at it for years, a lot of their albums feel more or less like a culmination of like what they've been building up to, rather than just like experimenting with something new, just altogether trying something different. Is it just me, or has it always just been like that and I'm just now realizing it?
I think also with artists like The Weeknd, who started out with a kind of small niche audience, and he's built and built and built towards becoming the kind of global superstar that he is. And part of it, I think, is time and experience and honing your artistry, but I think a lot of it is also money. Access to the best collaborators, the best studios, all of the money that the record labels have, they'll pour into artists that they know are guaranteed to make them money. So Yeah, I think it's a balance of those things, like having somebody who's already talented being supported in such an enormous way that they're able to create the best work they possibly can.
Yeah, there you go. I was gonna say like a good example of that other than The Weeknd is someone that is my personal favorite artist, Tyler the Creator. I'm sure you probably noticed from the posters in my background or whatnot. Like,
Mhm.
especially like listening back to some of the early stuff as hard as it is at times with some of the lyrics or whatnot, like just hearing how he has progressed and how he has kind of changed or whatnot. That last album, Call Me If You Get Lost, just felt like a culmination of just like everything he has kind of done, while also like telling the like for those that especially like listen along the way, give them kind of we've made it here together, you know.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and definitely he's a great example of somebody who's just, you know, if not doing a complete 180, it's like the public perception, understanding of who he
Yeah.
is so much broader and deeper now. And it's also like musicians aren't necessarily presenting their true self to the public. I mean, with someone like Tyler the Creator as well, it's like you can see that there's character that's involved in it.
Oh
It's
yeah.
not just, it's heightened. But yeah, he's a pretty incredible guy. All of those Odd Futures people have really done some amazing stuff.
Oh yeah. I know you talked about at least one of them when it comes to your podcast, The Spark Parade, which for people that don't know, like I said in the intro, basically where you get to geek out with incredible artists about their cultural spark of inspiration. I have to know because you've had this podcast since, correct me if I'm wrong, 2018, 2019, somewhere in that range.
Yeah,
Um,
2018.
2018. What exactly sparked you to create this podcast in the first place?
So after the 2016 election,
Mm, okay.
uh, initially, one of the priorities that Donald Trump laid out as president was to cut funding for the National Endowment for the Arts, for PBS, all of these like publicly funded arts organizations. I don't, I think persecuting black and brown people and making everyone's lives miserable kind of shifted to be the primary focus for him. But he uh, had this. Oh shit! Sorry, it's my phone going.
Yeah.
He had this idea that he was going to cut all this public funding for the arts, and it got me thinking about why art is important to people, why how art affects people's lives, how it affects the way that we see the world. And it was that combined with just kind of like wanting something, a project to work on that was under my control. As an actor, you're told your entire life, why don't you create your own work? Why don't you write a play? Why don't you, all these things? And to me, there's so much about acting that is you have to put up with a lot of bullshit that has nothing to do with acting. You have to, especially now,
Mm.
most of my auditions are at home. I have to light them, I have to film them, I have to do all this other stuff that's like every time I'm like, I'm not an expert at these things. Why do I have to be an expert at these things? I just want to do the acting part.
Right.
So the idea of like writing my own play or whatever, like I think I'm an okay writer, but I don't enjoy it. So I'd never really gotten into anything like that. But I think having the idea of a podcast, that's something that I don't need to ask anybody permission to do it, which is something you're constantly doing as an actor.
Right.
And it was just something creative to, keep myself going while in between acting jobs, and to just feel like I'm actually continuing to have some kind of artistic output, even when the things that I most want to do are not happening. But it's actually ended up being the most gratifying thing I've ever worked on. So
I mean, if I do say so, and I'll definitely shower a lot more praise later on, but like you certainly done a good job with like really presenting that platform and really like presenting just like incredible pieces of artwork, incredible like artists on your podcast or whatnot. What made you decide that you wanted particularly to make sure that you bring artists to talk about other artists on your podcast? Was just that kind of that mentality of, again, these are the people that are fully into it. Let's have them talk about what got them into it.
um Yeah, I mean, it's a good mix of all different kinds of people from every avenue of artistry. So I think it's like having a kind of broad focus and being able to explore all of those ideas of like what makes art important to people, how does art affect artists, um, all those things, like having this collection of people who come from all walks of life. And I wanted a lot of diverse backgrounds, and just getting stories from as many different kinds of people as possible. And I think yeah, it's been going okay.
Yeah. If I do say so myself, I think it's going really well for you, especially like I said before, the amazing guests you have been able to bring on. Like, does it ever surprise you just kind of the people you've been able to get on? Like, or is, I imagine like starting out, like especially since in fact you're into acting, you probably got like a lot of people in similar fields as you, so it's like just friends talking. But does it ever amaze you kind of the guests you've been able to bring on and talk about the art that they love?
Totally. From the beginning, it really was just like calling in favors from friends, and it wasn't necessarily people who are really in the public eye. Also, kind of, I was more willing to bend the rules about what I defined as an artist in the beginning. So it was like people who work in artist adjacent careers, art adjacent, I should say. But yeah, probably for the first year, it was mostly people who I knew. And then I started kind of sticking feelers out, just emailing people who I admired. There's an author named Paul Tremblay who writes books that I really love, and wrote to his agent, and they said, yeah, he'd love to. So I started kind of feeling like, oh, all I need to do is just offer the idea to people, and maybe some of them will say yes. um, yeah, it just kind of built from there. And like, I don't want to, you know, to full disclosure, I have a lot of help from friends in making this stuff happen too. Like, I do a lot of work, but I also have tons of friends who work in the music industry, and have been able to kind of introduce me to some people to get a foot in the door. I had probably the first big guest that I had was this singer named Will Young, who won the very first Idol competition in the world in the UK.
Okay.
So he is very famous in the UK. He's not really known in this country, but because he's known in the UK, once he's a friend of a friend, and so he agreed to do the show. And then from there, it kind of gave me a little bit of legitimacy in the eyes of record companies and whatever. And yeah, I wrote to a PR company in the UK because I wanted to interview a singer named Roisin Murphy, who I really love. And they suggested coming back to the US people. I wrote to them saying, hey, I want to talk to Roisin Murphy. And a couple weeks later, they randomly emailed me and said, hey, do you want to interview Connor Oberst? I was like, okay, yeah, sure. That sounds pretty good to me. And from there, it's like, I think getting a foot in the door is something that not everybody can do. And, access to opportunity is not equitable. But once I did that, just starting to reach out to other PR companies and have these interviews that I'd done that were kind of calling cards. And then it kind of snowballed from there. I have really good relationships with a lot of PR companies that throw me interviews, and I can pitch to them and stuff. So yeah, it's been pretty crazy, pretty exciting.
I'm not gonna lie, like I partially envy you with some of the guests you've been able to get on, especially with that PR strategy. Like I'm also like the main one for this podcast, responsible of trying to get guests on and whatnot, and I can totally attest where you're coming from. Like sometimes it's just as simple as just reaching out to a person. Best case scenario, you get the opportunity that you're looking for and you get to interview that person for a little bit. Worst case scenario, you get a solid no or you don't get a response. That's just been more or less my experience. I know starting out, one of my favorite artists that I love is a musician by the name of Left at London. And like she was on for like the third episode when I had next to nothing to do when it comes to what I had to present for this podcast, and just being able to talk to her was absolutely incredible. But I've also had, my producer Tipsy and like friends like introduced me to artists that I'd never considered beforehand or whatnot. But like once I really like delved deep into their art and what they presented or whatnot, I couldn't shut up talking to them,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like just the idea that, I guess I know that through social media and whatever, that it feels much more like most people are accessible in some way, or at least you can make an attempt to reach out directly to them. But one very surprising thing to me, and this is a hot tip if anybody wants to try to get an interview with anybody, a lot of people still have personal email addresses on their Facebook page. And I think because Facebook is like massively on the decline in terms of ways that people promote their work, that people have just kind of forgotten that they even have any presence on Facebook, or they just don't deal with it very much.
Right.
So lots of people who I haven't been able to find through PR companies, I'll just, look at their website and it's like, whatever,
Brittany.spears@gmail.com. I need to write that one down. No, I'm joking. I mean, to be fair, like I've done somewhat of a similar thing. Like a lot of artists that I like to bring on the podcast, some of them have their own websites that maybe they've neglected to acknowledge for a good couple years or whatnot. And a lot of those websites also have emails on them that, just send them an email. And that's how I've been able to get a good couple of guests. That's how I got Left in London. She had her email on her personal website. And I'm like, okay, I'll try it. Let's see what happens. And it happened.
Yeah. Comedians as well. Comedians always have their email address. They're the thirstiest. They just want attention. So, yeah.
Standing up on a stage and wanting applause from an audience. You're telling me they don't want attention?
I know. Shocking, isn't it?
It's amazing. Again, you talked about like a few of the guests here and there. Is there a guest that you were like most surprised that you're able to get on the podcast and talked with them about? Like, is there one that's just like almost like a step above, like, wow, I actually got them? Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, definitely Connor Oberst and Roisin Murphy I was really excited about. I talked to Chris Gethard.
Yes.
And, that was surprising. Just like, another one of those things where like I get sent press releases from, when people have stuff that's coming out, and it doesn't mean anything. It's like they're just sending an email blast to a billion people, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to give you an interview, but I'll just pitch to them and say, hey, you think this person wants to come on my show? And yeah, sometimes they just say yes, and it's like, okay, thank you.
I'm glad you brought up the Chris Gethard one, because that was honestly personally one of my like top 3 favorite episodes that you've done so far. Because one, I'm a person that prefers like the longer podcast, so the fact that one was almost an hour long, I already appreciated that. But like the movie that he brought up, Gross Point Blank, it's a film that I personally have not seen, sadly, but like just hearing him talk about it and hearing you guys discuss back and forth just kind of the different elements of it, especially like the elements of a John Cusack movie or whatnot, like it made me greatly appreciate that conversation a lot. Like that was a great chat right there.
Yeah, and there are certain people who really get the idea and are really excited to talk about something. That is not always the case. Right. I am not going to name names here, but I recently had a pretty disastrous interview. It was the worst one I've ever done, where I was talking to someone who definitely did not understand the concept and had chosen something that they liked, but they had nothing to say about it outside of, yeah, I like that. So I think talking to somebody who is, when I find people who are really excited about the concept of the show, not to keep harping on about Connor Oberst, but I think one of the reasons I got that interview is because he specifically said, I hate talking about myself. I have work to promote, but I don't want to talk about me. And one of the nice things about my show is that I feel like it gives people an opportunity to promote their work without having to say explicitly like, oh, this is how we wrote this song and blah, blah, blah. And it's, talking about their life, talking about their history, but through the lens of this piece of art that they love, so that it kind of takes the pressure off of them, but still is just as revealing as a more straightforward biographical interview would be.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the more genius parts about your show more than anything else is like you learn a lot about the artist without them obviously directly saying, yeah, this is why I did this is why I did that. It's like if you having them talk about like the stuff that inspired them and the stuff that they create, you get basically their life story behind whatever piece of media they want to promote.
Totally. Yeah. And yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say like some of the other artists that I absolutely loved. Another episode, what was it? Shaka talking about Nostalgia Ultra from Frank Ocean. Just hearing you two talk about basically like hip hop history, essentially, right there for a little bit. You could have your own You two could have your own podcast like that, and I'll listen to every single episode.
Yeah, and he's another guy who's like just really got it, and I think it's a combination of people who are really into the show and people who are just like nice people, good people who are, no bullshit, just up for having a chat. And I try to make it as conversational as possible. I don't want people to feel like they're, being grilled.
Right.
I think that adds to it too, just being able to kind of take it easy and shoot the shit rather than, being under the spotlight.
Exactly. No, it's fair. It's kind of like having that just nice, calm, cool, casual conversation about the stuff that they love. That's something I try to emphasize with this podcast. So I totally get where you're coming from with that one. Is there a guest that, whether it be like the subject that they brought up or just how passionate they were about it, is there a guest that you could think of that you've personally connected with the most when it comes to the media that they presented?
I talked to, there have been a lot of people have brought stuff to me that I'm, pretty equally obsessed with. But I talked to a comedian named Yasser Lester, who he's on, or was on Black Monday. Is it Monday?
Black Sunday? No, Black Monday. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. The Showtime show with Don Cheadle.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. He was on that. He's a pretty big comedy writer. He writes sitcoms and stuff. And he wanted to talk about Devs, which again is another Alex Garland project. And I think talking to somebody about something that I'm equally passionate about when they are easy to talk to, really into the concept, all those things, when all of the pieces fit in just the right way, those are pretty exciting and it feels kind of like magic, which is not to say, there are tons of people who've brought things to me that I'm not into.
Right.
Sometimes it's even things that I actively dislike, but I think finding a way, I can always find a way to connect with people. And even if it's not through that piece of art, it can be about the time period in which it was created. It can be in the other artists that have been influenced by it, and just like getting that kind of biographical information out of them through the work that they love. So like there are very few of these conversations that have been difficult or boring or that I haven't gotten anything out of. So it's been pretty cool across the board.
I mean, I can only imagine, and once again, it has to be like surreal with you to get to connect to a lot of these artists on a similar level to them, with that kind of the media that they've been able to present, and like even like you said, even if you don't personally connect with it, it has to be cool seeing kind of the love and passion that they like to gush about it, and feeling more or less like a connection through that more than anything else.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just like surprising to learn something about people's taste. You have a perception of an artist and, you can make assumptions about the kind of art that would have influenced them, and then it ends up being something completely different. So, that's really exciting to me too.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. And I imagine just hearing all these other people and their sparks or whatnot, I imagine for you it makes you more or less reflect on your own kind of spark, what kind of gets you like creatively thinking, or what has culturally like touched you. Do you have your own personal spark that you can think of, like the thing in culture that really pushes you to create the stuff you want to create?
Uh, yeah, I mean it's the same kind of conundrum where I'm really bad at narrowing down to specifics. The you know, individual cultural touchstones that have really set things off for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, again, all of Prince's work, um a lot of music from when I was growing up, a lot of the stuff that my dad used to listen to, Aretha Franklin albums and Stevie Wonder and Al Green and Otis Redding, that kind of stuff. But there's an Aretha Franklin album called To Be Young, Gifted and Black that
Okay.
just at its 50th anniversary. Um, and that's a pretty special one for me. It's another one of these albums that I think I can listen to straight through over and over and over again. And it's a really good example. I mean, I've talked about this a couple of times on my show, but like when people cover songs, I don't see the point in covering a song if you're just going to do it exactly the same way with the same production
Right.
and not add anything to it and make it your own. And Aretha Franklin was one of the masters of reinventing songs. And there's a version of an Elton John song on that album that she did that's just like it completely transforms the song, and to my mind, you know, improves on the original and kind of transcends what the original version of that song could achieve. So yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, I mean, I will say when it comes to the artists that you listed, especially with that Aretha album, or just looking at Prince as a whole, I think a major thing culturally is more or less how they were able to carry themselves, how they were able to like present themselves and really like let the world know, hey, this is who I am. You're going to either love it or you're not going to care. Either way, I'm still going to walk my own path, because like they knew who they were and they carried that as far as they could with just about every individual project that they did.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. And again, artists who are insanely talented. I mean, those people in particular. Prince played like, I don't know, 17 or 18 instruments. Taught himself how to play all of them. He wrote all of his own music. He produced all of it, or at least most of it. And you have this person who's insanely talented, but without 1999 and Purple Rain being these monster hits, I think, again, it's talent combined with resources and access to opportunity. So having these people who have these established careers and have the freedom to experiment and to push their boundaries and all those kinds of things. And that's not to say that people without recording contracts can't do
Yeah.
those things too. But yeah, I think people who are willing to take chances and kind of push themselves forward in ways that are unexpected. I mean, like Aretha Franklin's career that was whatever 50 something years long. Way that she kind of moved with the times. I mean, from the 60s to probably the mid 90s was putting out albums and had songs in the charts and just still remaining true to herself, but kind of experimenting in different genres and all that kind of stuff. I really admire that, and that's the stuff that really I'm kind of awestruck when I think about the careers that they've had. David Bowie as well is another one who's just
Yeah.
like constantly changing, constantly pushing himself forward. And yeah, that's pretty inspiring, pretty amazing.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I imagine, especially with you like on your own like career path, just trying like you said, like with the podcast, it's like, as you said yourself, as an actor, like you're kind of told what to do. You have to like do a certain thing, you have to execute a certain way or whatnot. With the podcast, you're essentially like these artists where it's like you call your own shots, you get to present it however you want, you get to push forth the message that you want, and you're gonna have fun at the end of the day with it, and do an incredible job with it, what you're satisfied with at the end of the day. And you could probably attest this, but each and every single one of those artists that you mentioned, they are the quintessential example of that. Granted, they had more resources than you have right now, but it's not like, if you don't keep at it, you could potentially be there at some point.
Right, right. And I think part of being an artist, to me at least, I know that there are a lot of people who I've worked with, a lot of people who I've known who have been artists in their life who just decided to stop. And, it can be a really rough life as well, unless, it's a vanishingly small percentage of people who can actively support themselves with art, and even smaller percentage of people that become, successful and have stability from it. So it makes sense that people want to find something that stabilizes them and means that they have some kind of financial security and all of that. But I'm just not capable of it. I don't know. I'm addicted, and I also feel like there are other things that I am capable of. There are other things that I can do with my life.
Right.
I just really don't want to. So
yeah, that's fair enough. You live your life to the fullest, to the happiest, as best you possibly can.
Yeah, definitely.
I did want to go back to the podcast real quickly because there's a question I did want to ask super quickly. One of the things that I've at least noticed is when it comes to your podcast, a lot of the guests that you bring on, they tend to have a lot of representation, whether it be with the black community, the LGBTQ plus community or whatnot. You have a good foundation of representation, which is about every single piece of art. Was that something that you consciously wanted to have with presenting this podcast, or is that just something that came naturally with it and you just wanted to present it nevertheless?
Yeah, I mean, it is a really important part of the show, trying to get as many perspectives as possible. And I think, the cliche upon which I built this podcast is art is a mirror and a window, and the two of the most important functions, being able to see yourself reflected in the work that's being put out there in the world, is really validating, but also as a window, being able to see other people's experience, being able to understand how the world works for people who are not like you. And I think a good way to have that kind of understanding is to hear about other people's experience of art, and how artworks have made them feel. And it's always been a really important part of the concept of the show. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're able to present that, especially in such an amazing manner that you have been able to. Considering all the guests you had on, and you've had a large variety of just incredible people, just hearing their conversations nevertheless, is there a guest that you were pining to have on your podcast, or is there a someone out there that you would just love to just pick their brain at and figure out what exactly sparks them?
Oh God, there are so many. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to talk to a lot more filmmakers and actors. There are so many. But also, just in terms of singers, I have a pretty heavy focus on musicians. And Sid, who is another Odd Futures person, she is really amazing to me. And I love her The Internet, which is her band, and then her solo stuff is amazing too. And talking about art that presents different perspectives and shows a specific vantage point, a specific identity. She's queer and she's black, and in all the music that she's produced, it's like pop songs, and she's singing, love songs or just songs about hooking up or dating or whatever, and they're all sung about women. But my experience in the past had been that if there were songs by queer people about sex or relationships or whatever, that it was like an event song that people had to, the focus was like, this is gay shit. And with these songs, they're just pop songs, and it's kind of beside the point, or it's not that. It's like her sexuality, her experience is so well integrated into the music that it's a part of what's happening, but it's not like we are trying to make a statement and pull focus from the music onto whatever, queerness that she's highlighting in that. And I think, people like Lil Nas X as well,
Yes.
have done that really fantastically. And, he's definitely a lot more overt about his sexuality in his music and in
Just
his
a little.
videos and stuff, which I think is absolutely fucking incredible. He's really
Amen.
just like the things that he has done. Actually, he's another person I would absolutely love to talk to, but I think that's a little above my pay grade at the moment. So,
It's not impossible, though. I'm sure if the,
Yeah.
the connections are there, if you keep up with this, there has to be a point to where that is possible. Try-
yeah, well, from your lips to God's ears, or whatever people say.
I mean, I was gonna say, to be fair, both of those people that you talked about, like Lil Nas and Sid, like those two alone, those are two that would be dreams to talk on this podcast as well, just to get their entire story more or less. So yeah, I can totally understand just trying to figure out like what exactly like creatively drives them like that. That could probably be like a 12-part series depending on who, depending on what they have to say, you know.
Right.
uh
Yeah.
But we've been talking a lot about like all these different, creative possibilities and all these different guests and this incredible stuff you've done with the podcast. But for this next question, I want to give you more or less the dream scenario, if I may. Let's say I come up to you and I'm like, look, Adam, I'm Big Shot Mr. Moneybags. We love everything that you have absolutely done, and we know you can produce some incredible stuff. You just need the little push. And with that, I could give you that push because we have access to anyone and everyone in whatever industry you want to have, and more money than there should be possible. There's so many different like reforms that we can probably help with. We'll help with that in a second, we promise. But for you right now, focus is on you. If given this opportunity, what would be the dream Adam Unze project?
I mean, I think the general dream is just to be acting consistently and making a living off of it. But that's not very specific. I think I would really love to turn the Spark Parade into a TV show.
Oh
I,
yes.
I have an idea that is it's kind of similar in the same vein as what David Letterman's doing on Netflix right now. And I was watching, he interviewed Billie Eilish for the new season of his show, and he's so conversational and curious and not quite reverential, but he appreciates the people he's talking to, and whether or not that artist is, reflects his personal taste, he is so open and, as I said, curious and just like wanting to get that person at their best and make them feel comfortable and just learn stuff about them by having a relaxing conversation. And I think doing something similar, but, in the specific lane of my show, asking people to choose a cultural work that means a lot to them and chat through that. it feels like something that has broader appeal than just a podcast. So, again, anyone listening who is sitting on a pile of money and wants to make that happen for me, please get in touch.
I mean, that's what Big Shot Mr. Moneybags is here for. Here, we'll give you at least a good couple bags. You do what you want with it. Make it as fancy and as sparkly as you want. We got this for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
But,
I'm ready.
But sadly, we do got to come down from the dream scenario, and we got to get back to reality. And I'll ask the ever so generic question. Where do you hope to see yourself 5 to 10 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, I want the podcast to grow. I've done some live shows, and I think doing more of that. And yeah, just, continuing to make art and try to smiles on people's faces. Again, it's not exactly the most specific 5-year plan anyone can have, but yeah, just kind of chugging along in the same direction. I feel like very satisfied with the stuff that I'm doing now, but I'd just like more people to see it, hear it, whatever.
I mean, you know what? If the most that you're trying to go for just 5-10 years from now is just more of what you're doing now, I'm down for it, because I it's incredible what you've been able to produce at this point. So if I can just get more of that, I'm down for it. So there you go.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
As we start to wind down the interview, I just have one last question that I want to ask. Obviously, like, you're deeply entrenched when it comes to art. You've had been for most of your life, for as long as you can probably remember, even beforehand. How important is art, not just for you, but for the world as a whole?
Massively important. I think the stuff that I was saying about art being a way for people to understand the world around them and be able to understand themselves and, kind of have their own experiences and their identity affirmed. Also, I think education is absolutely crucial, and having kids exposing kids to art in public schools in a way that they don't have to, there's no barrier that prevents access to it. I think art really opens people up, makes them more empathetic and intuitive and sensitive about the world. I think it's just one of the most important tools for communication and the generation of empathy that we have. So vitally important.
That is wonderfully worded, if I do say so myself. That is all the questions I have for you. I've already showered you with a bunch of praise, but I'm going to shower you with a little bit more because it's my podcast. I do what I want. Look, Adam, ever since I first heard about your podcast, ever since I first had a chance to listen to your podcast, I have just been hooked, line, and sinker at every little bit of it. Obviously, as someone that truly loves and appreciates art, getting to know that there's other people out there that love and appreciate art and want to give artists an opportunity to really express themselves further more than they already are, I cannot help but love and support what you've been doing. You do a great job presenting these artists. You do a good job, leading the conversation. Like, you're borderline masterful at what you're doing, and I cannot get enough of each and every single episode. Even if I don't know who the artist is, even if I don't know what they're talking about, I can listen to every single conversation that you have because you do a great job presenting that passion out there. And I think there are more people out there that needs to showcase that love and passion for artists, considering how much emotionally they divulge into their own stuff. So thank you for being one of the beacons out there to really present that. And I sincerely just hope nothing for the best for the Spark Parade and everything that you do, because if this is what you're doing now, I can only imagine the opportunities that can come for you in the future. So thank you for what you do. Thank you so much. That was really kind. I really appreciate that. I did forget to mention one little thing, though. So for those that don't know, you and I were actually used to be part of the same podcast network, the Apocalypse Podcast Network. You literally joined the podcast network like a week or two after I had joined. And when I first saw like your podcast or whatnot, I was honestly intimidated right off the bat, like straight up, because it's like, wait, you just added an art podcast. Now you're adding another art podcast to the podcast. I'm like, what the fuck? But then I stopped. I took a deep breath. I'm like, wait a second. One, he's emphasizing a lot more on the inspiration behind the artist. And two, another art podcast out there highlighting artists. Why should I complain? Artists are getting the love that they deserve. That's what we need to have in this world.
Yes, and we don't need to compete against each other. We can support each other. There's room for everyone.
Yeah, I was gonna say that initial like shock or whatnot, it was like gone almost. It was gone almost instantly after I thought about it for more than like 2 seconds. All right,
and I get it.
Say if there was never beef in the first place. That's the long and the short of it. So there we go.
Exactly.
So,
only love.
Only love. So if people want to be able to show more love to you and your podcast, go ahead and plug yourself for the people at home.
Yeah. It's I host the Spark Parade, as you've mentioned. I geek out with artists and entertainers about their cultural spark of inspiration. You can find the podcast anywhere you download podcasts, and I am on social media all over the place at Spark Parade.
There you go. By the way, I just gotta say, I know this is like, I guess part of your branding at this point, but you have such a soothing voice. Like, seriously, I think that's one of the things I love about the way you present your podcast. The fact that it's just you with that soothing voice, just like bringing in that comfort with that conversation. I just have to put that out there. So there you go.
Thank you again. All of this flattery are making me blush.
I'm just being 100% honest. Do you have any final words before we do sign off?
Everybody keep engaging with art and keep sharing your favorite pieces of art, your inspiration with other people, and that'll help them to have a better understanding of you.
There you go. There you go. And if you want to hear more incredible people sharing their favorite part of the art, seriously, go listen to the Spark Parade, guys. Like, if you love this podcast, you're going to love the Spark Parade. I can guarantee it. I can almost guarantee it.
Thank you very much. This has been great.
Well, thank you for taking the time to do this. I sincerely appreciate it. And for all the people at home, all I have left to say is, hasta luego, mi amigos. Tell me what's wrong. Tell me sparks in motion. Sing me a song. Tell me your eyes can all open. Show me it all. Pick me up in the car. You drove when you used to call. Show me it all. Thank you for sticking around to the end of the podcast. If this is your first time listening, I greatly do appreciate it. Having Adam on was a wonderful opportunity that I got to have, considering the fact that, I truly do love and listen to other podcasts, and Adam, what he's essentially doing is incredible. It's really giving artists an opportunity to really, express themselves and truly let people get to connect with them a little bit better than they may already have beforehand. I think it's such a unique concept. It's a fun podcast at the end of the day. And knowing how much Adam appreciated and loved art, I knew it was only a matter of time before I had him on the podcast. So, Adam, if you're listening to this point, thank you so much for sticking around to this point. And thank you once again for your time. It was fun to talk to you. It's great to know that there are other podcasts out there that are trying to give artists that opportunity to showcase who they truly are. And I truly love and admire what you're doing with this podcast, with your podcast. And I am eager to hear what guests you bring on next and what you're going to be doing from this point forward. One of the things I always try to emphasize with this podcast is trying to make sure that I give people the opportunity to really express themselves more than anything else. That's one of the beautiful things I love about art. It really gives people an opportunity to really express themselves and truly let the people know who they really are besides the art. The art is incredible, and I at least understand that for most people, it's a good avenue for them to truly express themselves. I feel like the Spark Parade does that very well with going with what sparked them, what sparked all these different artists to creatively go forward with what they're doing. That's something I try to emphasize with this podcast. well, it's just incredible knowing that there are platforms being created and platforms of support out there for incredible artists to showcase who they truly are and to showcase what they truly love. That's why I'm going to be rooting for Adam with what he does. That's why I'm going to be listening to the Spark Parade and supporting wherever I can. If nothing else, like I said, it's just fun to listen to. It's fun to really get inside the heads of some of these incredible artists and get almost a glimpse of like who they truly are based on just a simple piece of media. It's just fun. It's just fun all around. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with more or less like the little inspirational thing I want to say at the end here. Whether it's a single piece of media or whether it's several different like groups of media or different items of media, whatever gives you that spark to go forth and create incredible stuff, don't be ashamed of it. Really take it to heart and let that be a true driving force for you to create the incredible stuff that you want to. It doesn't even have to be media. If it's a person in your life or if it's an experience or whatnot, if that truly sparks you to truly get creative and truly let you express yourself, don't hold back on that. Let it all loose. Let that spark the creative fire in you. Inspiration can come from anywhere. Truly take as much advantage of that inspiration as possible and truly create the incredible stuff that I know you can do.